Hey guys, it's Thomas here with Technovision, and welcome back to our Minecraft modding tutorial series for 1.16.4. Now in this episode, as you can see, we are going to be making this beautiful but basic Ruby block to go along with the Ruby item that we made in the previous episode. So to get started, what you want to do is come over to your registry package here. Again, this holds the mod items class, and we're going to create a new class inside of here. And you want to name this class mod blocks and add that to repository. And as you would expect, this class is going to hold all of our blocks for our mod, just like how our mod items class from the previous episode holds all of our items. So inside of this mod blocks class, to create a custom basic block, what you want to do is, of course, create a public static final block, and make sure you import block from net.minecraft.block. And we're just going to name this the name of our block. So in my case, I'm going to be creating a Ruby block. So Ruby underscore block in all capitals again, because this is a final. So what this is going to equal is, of course, a new block. And this is going to take in a parameter called fabric block settings. And don't worry if you get confused, it's a little overwhelming at first. So we're going to go through all of the options, but you want to pass in fabric block settings. And from this, you can type dots of, and if we just click one of these methods here, inside of our of method, we can throw in a material and if you want some additional settings. So this is going to determine the material type of your block. So what you want to do is type material dots, and you can see that there's a bunch of different materials here. You can choose any one you like. And this is going to determine the material type. So I think a Ruby block is probably closest to a metal block, and I believe that's what the diamond block is as well. So I'm going to select material.metal, and I'm going to bring this down here just so it's a little bit easier to see, because this is going to be a very long line otherwise. But what you can do is, after this .of method, you can just keep adding settings to your blocks to make it more, more advanced, have more properties. So for example, I can type dots, and you can see here we can add a hardness value, we can add material by color, we can add certain tools that you need to break it, or luminance values, all sorts of crazy stuff in here. I'm not going to go through all of them because, as you can see, there are a ton, but I'm going to go through a couple just so we can make a basic block. So the first property I'm going to add is break by tool. So if you type break by tool, there we go. This is going to allow you to specify a specific tool that is required to break your block. So for example, with a diamond block in Minecraft, you can't really break it with a wooden axe, for example, but if you have a pickaxe, that's going to work a lot better when you're actually breaking that block. So to specify a tool for this block to be able to break it faster, we can, inside of our break by tool, specify the tool by typing fabric tool tags dot, and then we can choose a tool type. So in my case, I'm going to choose pickaxes. And then you can leave it there if you would like the game to allow all pickaxes to break your block, but you can add a comma and actually add a mining level if you would like, so that the game excludes certain levels of that specific tool. So if you go in the description, I actually have some more information on this. It's called a harvest level, and you can see here that the harvest levels range from 0 all the way up to actually 4. This is a little outdated. 4 should be netherite, I believe. But if you were to put, for example, the number 2 in here, so mining level of 2. If we look at this wiki here, we can see that a harvest level, sorry, I keep saying a mining level, I mean to say harvest level. A harvest level of 2 is associated with iron. So if we put 2 in here, that means that the game is going to require you to have at least an iron pickaxe or above in order to actually break and harvest this block. So you can play around with that if you would like. I'm gonna set this to 2 just so we can test it out, but I believe the default diamond block just has this set to nothing, so you can just keep it as is, or you could set it to 0, which is wood in this case. So that would allow any tool from wood and above, in the pickaxes section at least, to mine your block. So hope that makes sense. You can set the mining level to whatever you would like. I'm gonna set mine to 2 so that iron tools and above in the pickaxes section can break my block. So another property we can add, and that's important if we want to actually make sure this break by tool works, is requires tool. Now, by adding this property, this essentially, just like it states, makes the block require a tool to be broken. Otherwise, you'll be able to actually break it with your hand. And you can see here that you can actually do some cool stuff with your hand. I believe if you type break by hand, yeah, you can actually mess around with some stuff there. So yeah, definitely play around with that if you want to have your block be broken by your hand, although you could always just get rid of this requires tool property. So the next property I'm going to add is our strength. So you can do dot strength, and this will pass in two values, a hardness and a resistance. So in the description here, I have another wiki for hardness values. Now the hardness value is what is going to make your block harder or easier to actually mine. It's like how quickly it takes or how much time it takes rather to break your block. So in this like little wiki here, you can see some hardness values for the vanilla games. You can sort of compare. So for example, let's find the diamond block here. So the diamond block it has a hardness value of 5. So I'm gonna make mine pretty much similar to the diamond block. So I'm gonna give my block a hardness value of 5, and this is a float, so you want to put 5F, or you can also put 5.0F as well. So that's the hardness value, and then the next value is going to be the resistance, also known as the blast resistance. So again, I have another wiki here in the description called resistance, and this shows you the resistances in the vanilla game, and this is going to determine essentially how easy it is for your block to be destroyed by TNT, by creeper explosions, anything that like explodes pretty much. So as you can see here, like bedrock has a super massive value because it's never going to be destroyed by explosions, but then, you know, something like leaves has a value of 1 because it can really easily be destroyed by TNT. So I'm going to find a diamond block here, and diamond block has a blast resistance value of 30, so I'm just going to copy that and put 30 here. And it is a float, so you do need that F, 30.0F. Okay, and also I should mention this dot strength like parameter, or this method here, allows you to set a hardness and a resistance. But if you just want one of them, you can just use, for example, dot hardness, and you could just throw in the hardness value, or you could do dot resistance. So yeah, you can do that as well. You can just use dot strength just to sort of clean it up so that there's only one method for both. But again, totally up to you. And another interesting property you can set is dot sounds. And this will allow you to set the sound of your actual block when you like walk over it. So this material type is the sound when you break the block, but the sounds down here, the sounds method, is what plays when you walk on the block. So very important to like keep those straight. And I'm gonna have this be, again, the same as the material. So for our sounds, I'm gonna pass in block sound group. And you can see here that there are a ton of different sounds that you can choose from, like literally a bunch. I'm going to choose dot metal. And that way, when we break our block and when we walk on it, both times it will play the sound for a metal block. Of course, like I mentioned, there are still tons of other properties you can set. One of my favorites to set is dot luminance, and you can actually throw in an integer value in here to make your block glow in the dark. So stuff like that are really cool properties that you can play around with, but I'm just gonna leave it to these so that it is simple because this is a basic block. We'll be dealing with more advanced blocks in another episode, so don't worry about that. But if you don't wanna have all of these like, you know, sort of properties taking up space, you can of course put this all back up onto one line like this. And really quickly, I just want to show you, and there we go, there we go, there we go. So when you make a ton of blocks, normally you'll have them all in one line just so it saves space, but just for this tutorial, I'm going to keep them out just so that you can see them. Yeah, there we go, just so that you can see them and so that you can copy them down if you need to. So once you have your block created, you have all the properties set that you want to create a method here to register them. So just like we did in mod items here with our register items method here, we're going to do the same thing. So you want to create in mod blocks a public static void method, and we're going to name this register blocks. And inside of here, just like we did in mod items, we're going to register our blocks. So to register our Ruby block, what we want to do is get our registry. So registry and then dot register. And inside of this register method, first we're going to pass in the registry. In our case, this is going to be block. So registry dot block. And that's going to make sure that we get the defaulted registry of blocks so that we register this to the right area. And then once we have that set, add a comma, we need an identifier. So we're going to create a new identifier, and we can pass in here first our mod ID. So you want to grab your main class, in my case tutorial dot, and then you can grab your mod ID. So main class dot mod ID, And then of course we also need a path. So you want your path again to be exactly the same name as you have for your block here, except in all lowercase. So in my case, Ruby_block. There we go. And after the identifier, we can just throw in our block. So again, you can just copy your block here, your block name, and paste it in, and add a semicolon, of course. And there we go. So we have now registered the block to the game. We just need to make sure that this gets called at the start of initialization. So you want to come to your main class, in my case tutorial, and in onInitialize, just like we did with our mod items here, right below that, we want to grab our mod blocks class, and we want to register blocks. And that is going to make sure that on initialize, right after our items are initialized, we are going to grab mod blocks, and it's going to make sure that it runs everything inside of this method here. So once that's all good, we can actually move on to block items. So what you want to do is come over to your mod items class, because we need to actually create a block item for our Ruby block, because in vanilla Minecraft, blocks and items are two separate things, but every block has a subsequent item that is attached to it. That way, when you place a block, it goes from item form to block form in the game. It's a little confusing to wrap your head around, but essentially all you need to know is that for every block that you create in the game in mod blocks, you have to create a mod item that is attached to it. So inside of mod items here, I'm going to create a little note here just so we can organize it. I'm going to put items up here, and then I'm going to put all of our block items down here. Whoops. There we go. Just a little note just to organize things, not necessary. But inside of mod items, you want to create a public static final. And instead of, oh, did not spell final right. Instead of item, you want to create a block item. So this is going to be block item. And make sure you import that. And you want to name this exactly the same name as your block here. So in my case, Ruby block. So Ruby_block. And this is going to equal a new block item, and this is going to pass in two things. First thing, your block that you just created in mod blocks. So to pass that in, you can just grab mod blocks, dots, and then you can grab your block. So this is going to be the block that this item is attached to in the game. So Ruby block, and then of course, just like we put here, we need to add some item settings. So we can do that with new item.settings, and then of course you can set whatever settings you want. For this item, I'm just going to do .group because all I need for this item is to set the creative tab group. So .group, and then I can set the creative tab group to item group dots, and we can just put it, let's put it in building blocks. There we go, that's fine. And then of course add a semicolon. And there we go. So I know that it's a little bit off screen here. I'll try to move this over just a little bit. But yeah, it's super long line, I know, but there you go. That's pretty much it for a block item. And of course we have to also register this just like we did with our old item. So come down here, and again, just like before, registry.register. And we're gonna grab our registry.item because it is still an item. We need an identifier for it. So new identifier, throw in our mod ID. So tutorial.mod ID. And then of course our path, and this is going to be again exactly the same name as this, just all lowercase. So Ruby_block, and then of course as always our last parameter here is going to be pretty much just our block item. We can just throw it in there, so Ruby_block, and again that's going to make sure that we actually register this specific block item. So there we go, our item and our block are now inside of the game, they're registered to the game, but we have no model and no texture, and actually no name for them either in the game, so we need to do that right now. So to do that, what you want to do is come over to resources here, go to assets, open that up, and we need to create a new file in here, or a new folder rather. So inside of your mod ID folder here, minus tutorial, you want to right click, create a new directory, and we're going to call this block states. And we're going to come back to this, but this is going to hold our block states for all of the blocks we create in the game. Inside of our models package here, we have an item package. We want to create a new package inside of models to go alongside that. So new directory, and we want to name this block. Should be singular, no plural, just block. So inside of models, we should have a block folder and an item folder now. And then inside of textures, again, we have an items folder here. We want to add a blocks folder. So inside of textures, new directory, and you want to name this just like with our items, blocks, and it should be plural this time with an S. So there we go. So inside of models, we should have block, item, and then for items, or textures rather, we should have blocks and items. And then again, our block states folder outside of all of that. Okay, so now that we have all of those new folders, I know it's a lot. First thing you want to do, go over to your lang package here, go to en_us.json, and we can actually set a name for our object. So just like we did with our item, we want to set a name in the game. So we can add a comma here and add a new entry. This is going to be block dots because it is a block, not an item, and then our mod ID. So in my case, tutorial dots, and then the name of your object. Again, that name is right here, Ruby_block. So we can paste it in. So yeah, the only thing that's really different here, besides, the name obviously, is that this is a block instead of an item. And then of course, a colon, and we can set the name to whatever we want. I'm gonna call this Ruby block. So yeah, there we go. Now we have a name set for our block. We can close out of this. The next thing we need is a model. Now this is gonna be a kind of annoying process because you have to do it every single time you create a new block. Of course, you could always create a generator yourself if you wanted, but first we need a model for our block. So what you can do is go in the description, and I've actually pre-made all of these for you. You can just change your mod ID and your block name. So go in the description, and the first paste bin in the description should take you to this models block paste bin. And what you want to do is come over to models block folder here, right click, create a new file, and you want to name this the name of your block. So in my case right here, you can see our path is Ruby_block. So Ruby_block.json. Add a repository, and just like we did with our item in the previous episode, we need to actually set a model for this. So come over to this first paste bin, and you can just copy all of it, and you can just paste it right in. And I'll go through all of this in a second, but what you want to do, of course, is change your mod ID to your mod ID. Mine is tutorial. And you want to change your block name to, again, exactly what you say here for your path, Ruby_block. And there we go. So what this is going to do, essentially, this is the model. Now we don't have any crazy model for this block right now. This is a basic standard 4-sided block. So what we're saying here is that this is a regular block. It's just a cube, and there's one texture for all of it, for the entire block. And that texture is located in your mod ID folder, textures, blocks, / and then Ruby block. We're gonna throw our texture in there in a second. So yeah, so now that we have all that, we also need a model for the item, because the item is separate from the actual block, as I mentioned earlier. So go to the item package here, right click, create a new file, and you're gonna name this, again, just like you did before, Ruby_block. All these JSONs for right now are gonna be named RubyBlock.json. Add a repository, and if you go to the second link in the description, that will take you to the models item paste bin here. You can copy all this and paste it in, and again, change your mod ID. Mine is tutorial, and you can change the block name to the block name. Again, mine is Ruby_block. And now what this is doing is it's just saying that the item model is going to be inherited from a parent, and that parent it's directing you to the parent, which happens to be the JSON we just created. So pretty self-explanatory, and then it's gonna grab the texture from here. So yeah, you can follow it, yourself if you're a little bit confused. Just follow these directories and you should be fine. And then the last JSON we need to make is in block states. So right click in the block states folder, create a new file, and you wanna name this, again, same thing as always, Ruby_block.json. because that is the block we are making this for. And finally, go in the description, go to the last paste bin. This will be the block states paste bin. You can copy all of this information, paste it in, and just to sort of explain this, well, I guess we should set our mod ID first. So again, change mod ID to your mod ID, change block name to the name of your block. Mine is Ruby_block. And all this is essentially doing is setting a block state for your block. A block state is sort of like I know this is gonna sound like a lame answer, but it's like a state that your block is in. So I'll explain it later when we go into block states in an actual video. But really all you need to know right now is that our block is static. There's nothing interesting happening to it. So we're pretty much setting no interesting block state. So that's why we have nothing set here. There's pretty much no variance. So yeah, and it's essentially just setting the model for our block at all times to what we just created in models block. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, if it doesn't, you can just follow these directories back, and you should be able to see the relationship between them. and it should be pretty easy and simple once you realize their relationship to each other. Now the last thing that we need to do is actually get our texture, and I will actually leave a tutorial just like last time in the description on how to texture your own block. You can do this in Photoshop or GIMP or Microsoft Paint, whatever you want. All that matters is that your texture is a PNG file. It has to be named exactly what we put here. So yeah, same thing that we put for our path. In my case, Ruby_block, and it is case sensitive, so that's very important. And of course, you want to make sure that you're making this in 16 by 16 pixel dimensions. And yeah, again, you can mess around with this later on, but for right now, I would just stick to 16 by 16 pixels. So once you have this, you want to open up that folder in textures, so textures, blocks, and you're going to drag it in there. So let's just drag it in there really quickly. Drag it into blocks, refactor, add a repository. You can see the texture right there. And now instead of textures, blocks, we have our ruby_block.png. And yeah, so now we are pretty much done. We've created our block, and let's go check it out in the game. To run the game, again, you come up to the green triangle here. I guess we could file save all first. Click this green triangle, and the game will run, and I will see you guys inside of the game. All right, so we're inside of the game, and if we go to our creative menu here and we go to search items and we scroll all the way down, we can see that we do, oh, I accidentally clicked out of it. There we go. We can see that our Ruby block is here. We can see the creative tab is set to building blocks just like we set. And if we grab this block here and we place it down, there we go. It is on the ground, looking perfect, looking beautiful. And you probably can't hear the sound on this video because I turned it down super low, but the walking sound is correct, just like we set. And now let's test out the tool type. So let's grab I believe we set it to an iron pickaxe or above. So let's grab like an iron, a diamond pickaxe, and then like a stone pickaxe. And we can grab like an axe just to make sure that it is set to pickaxe. So let's go to game mode 0, or game mode survival rather. Now, if we try to break this block with an axe, you can see that we're not really able to break it very fast because we did set the tool type to pickaxe. But if we use a pickaxe here, we can see that we can break it just fine. Now, the block is not going to like drop anything, and that's because we haven't set a loot table for it yet. That is a much more advanced concept that I will go into in a future video, but for now, the block will not drop anything, so I apologize for that, but we will be covering that very soon. Now, to make sure, as you can see, we did set anything from iron and above can break it, so iron can break it, and you can see diamond can break it as well. But if we use anything below iron, in this case stone, it will pretty much be useless, and it won't be able to harvest the block. So yeah, that'll be much more important when we get into loot tables. The last thing I want to mention is that if you don't want to use the creative menu, you can always use the command /give @p for player, and then your mod ID, so tutorial, : and then the name of your block, so Ruby_block. And there you go. You should get it right in your inventory. All right, so that is it for this episode. Thanks guys so much for watching. If you want to create a new block in the future, of course, now you know all you have to do is add an entry into mod blocks, add an entry into mod items for a block item, register both of those entries, and then create those 3 unique JSONs that I mentioned earlier that specify the model, as well as adding your texture to the specified folder. And you have your custom block in the game. So thanks guys so much for watching. Make sure to check out our Discord if you need any help or support, and I will see you in the next episode.